Howdy, folks. What's going on? This is the Outlaw Hatfield back at you one more time. Of course, like always, I've got Mr. Rich White with us. How are you, Mr. Rich?
Yeah, not too bad. How's yourself?
I'm good. Do you have a fan going?
Yeah, probably the bathroom fan you're picking up.
That's a loud fan, dude.
Yeah, I know. It's in the little half bath that's right over that way, and if we turn that off, then we have to deal with the litter box odor. So
Oh, well. Well, that's interesting. Um, so what wrestling news do we have this week to go over?
of course it could be. Hold on, it might be my laptop speakers. You might be picking up too. Or the fans. Yeah, because they seem to be going good. Did that help any?
Yeah, that's a little better. So what wrestling news is there to go over this week? Anything that I may have missed other than Zeus passed away?
Let's see. Okay, Kenny Omega on Impact Wrestling on Tuesday night.
Yes, I saw that.
It is
Um,
obviously pre-recorded um, clip, but still interesting. Oh, what, a good 15 minutes long?
yeah, pretty much. Uh, as far as old school stuff, I didn't really see anything this week. Did you?
No, not really.
No. Like we were talking about before we went on air here. Uh, I only recalled one match with Zeus and Hogan. It was the cage match with Brutus Beefcake, Hogan, Savage, and Zeus. Apparently, you knew of another. Everybody's billing this guy as a wrestling legend. I mean, it's a horrible thing that he's done. Don't get me wrong. Any loss of life is tragic, but I think calling the man a wrestling legend is a bit of a stretch.
Well, most definitely a stretch. And like you said, is it a shame that he's gone? Yes. But putting that he's a wrestling legend in your article or on YouTube in your video title, you're just looking for clicks on your story at that point. Is he is not a wrestling legend. He had two matches. He had the tag team match that you were talking about, and then there was one where he faced Hogan individually. And that was it. That was his wrestling career right there. Other than that, the guy was just an actor.
Um, he did do a few spots here and there where he'd hit Hogan or something from behind and then get in the ring with him and wring his neck. He'd,
Yeah.
he'd stand
Again,
up right behind him and grab his head and do this number.
yeah. Usually after a match, he would attack Hogan. He attacked Hogan a couple times, but that was setting up for the actual match itself, which
Yeah.
they were trying to build story there.
So, um, what's a couple interesting matches this week? Do you remember when the Four Horsemen broke Ricky Morton's nose?
Not offhand.
Well, it was after the whole incident with the Road Warriors and Dusty putting Ole out, so Ole was gone for that little length of time there. They attacked Ricky Morton. Rick Flair, they were holding Ricky down. Rick Flair did the whole knee drop thing that he always does, and apparently smashes Ricky Morton's face. So it was a good angle because at that time the Four Horsemen were a lot like the NWA or the NWO was, in the later '90s. So they were just tearing everybody up. No better wrestling in the '80s than
There were
Memphis.
only four of them, not 40.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. Could you imagine the NWO going up against that version of the Four Horsemen?
If they would have kept it at Hogan, Savage, and the Outsiders, that could have been interesting.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's where they went wrong with the whole NWO thing. They could have got another one or two guys in there, but they overdid it.
Yeah, you had everybody in NWO just about at one point.
Hmm
Then you had
including including Dusty Rhodes.
yeah, and then they had copycat stables like the Latin World Order, which was started by Eddie Guerrero. You know,
Yeah, the Latino World Order. Yep.
yeah.
And there was NWA or NWO Wolfpack, NWO Black and White. Um, it just got stupid after a while, man.
And then ECW, they had the Blue World Order.
Really?
Yeah, ECW
Huh.
got it on the act. They had the Blue World Order. They walked around with blue T-shirts with BWO done like the NWO logo.
Lord have mercy. You know, those guys was making a fortune off that NWO thing. They really were. Uh, I don't think another group of wrestlers ever got over, especially mainstream, because they were on all the television programs. They were all over MTV. Uh, they were just they were just everywhere.
The closest may have been the Bullet Club when you had Kenny Omega over there. Before him, AJ Styles. You go from the AJ Styles era of the Bullet Club into the Kenny Omega era of the Bullet Club. That may have been the closest any stable has come to that because you had people in Japan, all over Japan and even the United States walking around in Bullet Club shirts.
Yep. But as far as mainstream, and we're not talking about just wrestling fans, because they were doing the whole spring break thing with the NWO, in different parts of the world, and half the people there probably wasn't even wrestling fans, but everybody knew who Kevin Nash was. You know, everybody knew who Scott Hall was. These guys were making bank. Uh, it's just as popular as they were to wrestling fans. That shows you how much influence these guys actually had outside of the wrestling world. You know, and Kevin Nash especially. I mean, even today, a lot of people don't know that in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movie,
He was super.
Kevin Nash was a superset, was a shredder.
Yeah, he was super shredder.
Yep. So, uh,
There was other two guys I can't remember who it was that were the other two big mutants in that movie. I can't remember who they were. But
so,
Jingle All the Way,
yeah.
you know who played the giant Santa in that, don't you?
Nope.
It's Big Show.
Really?
Yeah, the really tall
Huh,
Santa. That was Big Show.
huh. I didn't know that.
That was when he was still in WCW as the Giant.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question. What wrestler do you think became the best actor? Other than The Rock. We're going to throw The Rock out
I was
because
going to say it would have to be The Rock.
other than The Rock, and I should say other than Batista as well, because
Yeah, that would have been the other.
I would have to say Roddy Piper.
Piper was only in a handful of movies.
Yeah, but he did.
Big Show actually has a TV series on Netflix.
Does he?
Yep.
Wow. What's the name of it?
Something with having to do with the Big Show name. I can't remember the name of it right now. It's a family sitcom
Oh,
based
huh.
around his character, his wrestling character. That is.
That's weird.
You know, there the Miz has done a couple of TV movies. Put aside the Marine nonsense that actually weren't that bad. He did one. He did a Christmas one a couple years ago with Paige, and it was actually wasn't that bad. The kids liked it.
Um, the one I thought was good with Cena was the one where the sniper. Right, he wasn't. He was in the movie, but he didn't do shit. He was laying on the ground the whole match, the whole movie. Where a sniper shot him. I think the name of it was the Wall or something. And he's a part of a sniper team, and they go down to investigate. And there's a sniper down there next to this somewhere, and they don't know where. And Cena gets shot, and his partner is trying to help him, and Cena gets shot again after the partner tries to help him. And it's actually a really intriguing movie. Of course, they never kill the bad guy sniper, so it was a really good movie. Andrew Andrew and Bundy's were good actors.
Yeah, he meant Andre.
Yeah, Andre. Andre wasn't really too bad, and he was in a little bit of history. As far as I know, the first acting role Andre ever had was on The Bionic Man playing Bigfoot.
Yeah, he was the Sasquatch.
Yep, he played Bigfoot on The Bionic Man.
And it's a shame that John Studd died before when he did, because you watch Harley Davidson and the Marlboro Man, he wasn't bad in that.
No,
His plan was to go into acting as he was growing off in wrestling business, and he passed away before he really got a chance to.
well, I thought he was the part he played in The Princess Bride. I thought he did a great job.
No, I'm talking about Big John Studd, not Andre.
Oh,
Have you seen on Harley Davidson and the Marlboro Man with
it's been years since I've seen that dude.
Yeah. Big John Studd was the guy that owned the bar that they hung out at that they were trying to save.
Oh well, huh. Yeah. There has been a lot of actors to try, or wrestlers to try their hand in acting, and you know, most of them it don't end well. It really don't. Andre did well. Piper did well. The Rock, of course, Batista. Um, but other than that, I mean, there's been a few others. Randy Savage had a couple roles in movies and television here and there. But other than that, I really can't recall anybody making that leap. Can you? Austin.
Don't forget Cena.
Well, Cena, but
Yeah. Well, have you ever seen the episodes of Psych that Cena was in?
no.
He played the female detective's brother, and he was a special operations person in the army. And he was good in that show. The part that he was playing, he was good at it.
Yeah. I don't know. I have never been a Cena fan, so I don't really pay much attention to anything he does.
I've never been a fan of the Cena character, but when you look at the things that he does for Make a Wish and stuff, you got to give the man respect for that, if nothing else.
Yeah, this is true. Well, I honestly feel the same way about Brock Lesnar. Not a fan of that guy. I have never been a fan of Brock Lesnar. For when they brought him in, he was okay when they first got him in. But then later on, they made him just an almost impervious to anything guy, and I just hated that. You know, if you remember back in the '80s when Jim Cornette brought Bubba Rogers in, the way they did that was they put Bubba in the ring with guys, and he would not sell a damn thing. Dusty Rhodes wrapped a chair around his head, and he didn't sell it, you know. And it got him over. But then when they actually started having the matches, you know, when he got hit, he sold it, you know. And with Brock Lesnar, that man had a 15, 20-year career, and I don't think he maybe actually sold for anybody.
Oh yeah,
Maybe The Undertaker.
no, he has. I've seen. He sold for Ricochet, who's a little guy. You actually thought Ricochet was going to win the match. It turned into the way the match finished was Ricochet came off the top rope doing his big spinning splash move that he does. I can't remember how many revolutions it is. It's like six something or other. But he hit that, and Lesnar was lucky and got him in the Kimura and made him tap, and that's how Lesnar won. As Ricochet was going for the pin. Lesnar sold his ass off in that match. So there are matches where Lesnar will sell the other guy's stuff. He did with Seth Rollins when him and Seth Rollins were feuding. He was selling like crazy in those matches. He did it for Roman Reigns. So there are people that Lesnar will sell for, and there's other people that he won't.
I don't know. I have just never liked that type of character in wrestling. Even when, if you remember, even when Bill Goldberg was doing his big streak and when he first came into WCW, he would actually sell the matches. He would take bumps, he would get hit, he would get hurt, he'd stumble around, and then he would just make a huge comeback and just, of course, win the match. But he always sold. He didn't act like he was just completely and totally invincible.
Well, speaking of Goldberg, let's throw out their first match that the two of them had way back in the early 2000s after the merger. One of Goldberg's recent two comeback into the WWE when he was Universal Champion. Lesnar sold for him the first time around. Goldberg beat him in like 30 seconds.
Yeah, I remember seeing that. I remember that.
And Lesnar made it look believable.
Well, wasn't Lesnar hurt or something at the time?
No. He was getting ready to go off for hunting season or something, and Lesnar's hardly ever around anyway when he is.
So, I don't know. Is Lesnar still wrestling full time, or is it now just whenever he decides he wants to?
Whenever he decides he wants to show up and get a paycheck.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of them like that.
He was doing it when he was the champion.
Huh.
People were, there was all kinds of backlash about that from the fans and the wrestling sites and the wrestling YouTube channels and stuff because Lesnar won the belt and he'd be gone for 3-4 months at a time.
Could you imagine? Could you imagine Ric Flair doing something like that in the 80s?
Oh, that would have never flown in the 80s.
Hell no. I mean, think about how many times did Ric Flair wrestle in a week? In a given week, how many times and in how many territories was he actually wrestling in a given week? 16, 17 matches? Because sometimes they'd go 2 a day.
So there were days where they would do 3 a day if you listen to Arn Anderson's podcast.
So
Greensboro, Charlotte, and Charleston in one day.
God. And Ric Flair had that title up in all 3 places or 2 places. and then after the last show, be on the road for another 5 or 6 hours, get to town, maybe get 4 hours sleep, and then do another one.
Yeah, he'd go right from Charleston to Memphis and do a show, then head over to cut back over to Nashville on the way back to the Charlotte area.
Yep. So, back in the territory days, if you had a title, you were expected to be in the ring. You were expected to be on TV. If your name was on the title, then you were expected to wrestle. That's just the way it was. I wish you'd get back to that, and that's why I am quickly becoming a huge fan of the new NWA and the AEW. Um, things seem to be getting very interesting in those two organizations right now.
Yeah, that's why I keep telling you, man. If you like AEW, you like the NWA, you need to check out New Japan.
Yeah.
I'm telling you.
Well, I've been doing a little background research, and apparently they are either in talks with the AEW and NWA, or New Japan has already signed some deal with them. So I don't know.
Yeah, you stop and think about it. AEW essentially branched off from New Japan.
Yeah,
It was started by some of their biggest stars at the time.
and I'm not real sure how Impact's going to fit into all of this. I really ain't.
So how it
Which
fits in now is Don Callis is the executive vice president over there at Impact. He is when he was talking about how he's known Kenny Omega since he was 10 years old, since he was a kid, since Omega was a kid, and that he was trained by Omega's uncle. He's not lying. That's truth. That's all true. That's the connection between Impact and AEW. That was the connection between Impact and New Japan. It's been Don Callis.
So here's the thing. Let's say there's a merger. Let's say there's a Impact AEW New Japan type merger goes on. It's sort of like happened with the NWA back in the late 80s. How does that affect the rest of the wrestling world?
Oh, Christ, you've already had Ring of Honor have a working arrangement with the NWA and New Japan. Remember when Cody was the NWA World Heavyweight Champion, he was signed to New Japan, but he was also the whole Bullet Club would wrestle in Ring of Honor as well, even though they were in New Japan signed people. This has been in the works for a while. This isn't something new, and they just haven't pulled the trigger yet because there's a little bit of creative differences and stuff along those lines. Once they get everything ironed out, this is going to be big.
That's what I'm saying. Do you think it will be a creditable threat to the WWE?
If they got Tony Khan's monetary backing and New Japan's financial backing, oh yeah. Remember, Tony Khan is the son of the owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Mm-hmm.
Tony Khan's money running AEW is coming from Daddy. The guy is one of the richest guys in the world.
So, well, that's not the first time that's been the case either. I mean, remember who bought the NWA there in the beginning?
Well, I was going to say if you were going to go with what's her face and Impact, that was just Daddy doing whatever his wanted.
No.
Tony Khan is a businessman who knows how to run businesses. He helps run the Jaguars.
Well, that's what I'm saying. When Ted Turner took over NWA, when he bought it out, it was a game changer. It really was. For the first time, you had a guy with enough financial backing that, he could have been a severe threat to Vince McMahon.
Ring of Honor could be. The guy that owns Ring of Honor is the guy that owns the Tribune networks of newspapers and TV channels.
Hmm.
The reason why it's not is because they just keep mismanaging it.
So let me ask you something. We got Sting now in AEW.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, he's the big headline was Sting back on TNT after 20 some years, 23 years, I think
Oh,
it's
and
been.
boy, are they playing that up if you saw this week's.
Oh yeah, I know. I've been watching it. So, and by the way, I watched the segment where Sting walks into the ring and Cody's doing an interview, and Arn Anderson's was like, you know what? I know you have an agenda, and I know you have an agenda, and
Yeah.
I'm going to just step out of the ring.
Yeah, that was this week.
Yeah.
Dynamite.
You know what? I wish Arn would have stayed in and brought some of that old, give and take that Arn Anderson was known for with the other guys.
Yeah, but I don't think that's what they were setting up for in that particular segment. This was more of a Sting dusty segment.
I look at that and I go, imagine a partnership between Arn Anderson and Sting about all the people in the universe that would ever be working together. Arn Anderson's Sting. That right there could go 100,000 different directions, and I'm thinking, okay, where's the line at here? What's going to be the next step? Are they going to bring Flair in for some reason?
He's still under contract with WWE.
Are they going to bring maybe Tully in? So,
but they've been playing. If you go back a few months, they've been playing up the angle in AEW where Tully and Arn may not like each other so much.
Really?
Yeah. When they had the show where they were celebrating tag teams and they had Arn and Tully there with the Rock and Roll Express, there was some tension between Arn and Ole in that segment.
So Arn and Ole or Arn and Tully?
Yeah, Arn and Tully. You know who I mean.
Yeah.
I misspoke. But yeah, they had some tension there. So I don't know. And Tully is managing Shawn Spears, and they're playing at Shawn Spears and Cody don't like each other.
Oh. Oh, that's interesting. I'm just wondering how they're going to make Sting fit in with all this. Is he going to bring somebody else in? Is he going to...
You weren't paying attention during the segment. They hinted at it. He's going for the TNT title.
Sting?
Remember who was sitting up in the audience?
Yeah, I remember that.
Sting looked up at him and said that he has something that looks real familiar. What was it? It was the TNT title with the TNT channel logo on it.
Yeah, he said there was something that looked real familiar. I didn't think he said anything you had. I'll have to go back and rewatch it.
Because he told Cody, I'm not here for you. And then he starts talking about Darby. He mentions about Darby being up in the crowd with something that looks real familiar.
Yeah.
I got him challenging for the TNT title.
How can he wrestle?
Very carefully.
Yeah, you'd have to.
Stone Cold did it for years with a broken neck.
Yeah.
He could do one or two more matches as long as he doesn't take any serious bumps, and Darby's style wouldn't be conducive to him taking that kind of bump.
I don't know, man. I don't think that I'd be willing to. If I'm Sting, okay, I've already been hurt. Okay, I'm already on the sidelines because of
Hey,
some injury.
Edge came back with the same kind of injury.
Who did?
Edge,
Yeah,
Ed,
Edge
Edge
ain't
and Stinger both had
Edge.
the same surgery.
Yeah, Edge ain't 62 years old though, dude.
No, but he's in his late 40s, which isn't that big a difference in at that point. Your body isn't going to heal as fast in either case.
Uh, I don't know, man. I'm just uh,
I think they're going
I'm
to do one or
iffy.
two matches with him with Darby, and that's going to be he'll win he'll win the first one. Darby will beat him the second one, and it'll just put prestige on that belt.
Yeah. Um. So maybe it goes another route though. Maybe Sting. You know. Okay. Let's do this. Sting's there. Anderson's there. Anderson and Sting don't get along. Cody starts searching out Sting. Anderson turns on Cody. Sting takes Cody under his wing, and your phone's ringing.
Yeah, it's my wife calling. She's not home. I got to take that.
Okay, go right ahead. Oh, the things that can happen on live YouTube. Wonderful. Anyway, I have 0 viewers at the moment. So, Alaskan, I do thank you for being there, sir. Guys, I know we're just basically chit chatting about pro wrestling at the moment. So, hey, uh, yeah, but what I'm saying is for anybody that's out there that might be interested is Anderson turns on Cody. Sting takes Cody under his wing. Everybody knows that Cody's a big fan of Sting, has been his whole life. So, you see Cody taking on more of a Sting like persona. You know, it could go 100,000 different ways. It's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out, to see where it all goes, where the battle lines are going to be drawn. And don't forget, there's still other aspects out there. I mean, there's still a Chris Jericho that you have to look out for. Uh, Still, other threats that could rear their head. And with the way WWE is dropping guys right now, any of those guys could show up in AEW. They could show up in NWA. If the NWA does this whole crossover thing with the uh, AEW, then and with Impact in the mix, you could have some of the best wrestling that we have seen since 97, 98. Um, I'm really starting to get excited about pro wrestling again after all these years. I didn't think it was ever going to happen. Uh, I mostly watch the old school stuff. I mostly watch the old school matches, but more and more I find myself watching the newer stuff, and I'm getting drawn into it, which to me is absolutely fantastic. I don't get that when I watch WWE. I don't get that sense of, I don't know. Uh, I don't get drawn into it with WWE matches. Never have. I think they're too over the top. I think that they just push things to a limit that I think is rather just silly, unbelievable, and that's what I want in a good wrestling match. I want the believability. I want to be able to suspend the non-belief and get involved and watch this match and get emotionally involved in it, and you can't do that with a WWE match.
Main
I,
roster, yes. NXT, you can.
exactly, and that's what I'm saying. You know, that's why I am so excited about this new stuff that's going on right now because I'm actually starting to get emotionally involved in these matches again for the first time since, like I said, 96, 97, 98. And it's exciting. It's really exciting. I was listening to the and you and I have talked about broadcasters before. You know, they're the guys that really bring the match to life. A good broadcast team can turn a mediocre match into something wonderful. Uh, but sitting and listening to Jim Ross go back and forth with Tony Schiavone, I'm getting flashbacks to 1987. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
When these guys were on TBS, the 605 show, calling tag team match between, you know, the Midnight Express and, whoever they want to put against them. You know, the Mulkeys for crying out loud.
Yeah.
And you hear Jim Ross and you hear Tony Schiavone, or you hear uh, Tony Schiavone or Jim Ross talking about, Nikita Koloff coming to the ring to rescue Dusty. So,
Yeah. You want a blast from the past? Go back and watch the last takeover that just happened last Sunday.
uh
It was
huh.
War Games.
Was it?
Yep. It was the
Hmm.
yearly War Games. They had a strap match in there. You had a triple threat for the North American title. You had two War Games matches. The show started with the women's War Games match and it ended with the men's War Games match. The Undisputed Era were taking on Pat McAfee and his crew in War Games. That was a hell of a match.
The only problem I ever had with the War Games matches, and I thought they were some of the most brutal, best matches in history. I don't think they made the cage high enough. I don't think they made the cage tall enough.
Oh, you know how tall the WWE cages are? That's how
Yeah.
tall the War Cage match, the cage in the War Games is. So they're tall. WWE, WWF always had taller cages when NWA did. So
Um. Yeah, but I remember the first War Games match. You would see them on the top turnbuckle, and they had barely had room to stand up.
yeah,
Uh.
well they don't put a roof on the cage in the WWE Wars game match. You had Pat McAfee he climbed to the top of the cage and did a senton off the top of the cage onto everybody.
We'll see. And in that sense, I don't think it's a War Games match. A War Games match has to have the top of the cage.
Well, that would be too much like Hell in a Cell.
Yeah, for WCW or for WWE.
Yeah, but you still get the same feel for the match. If you escape, your team is disqualified. So that's why they put that rule in there so nobody climbs out of the cage. And this way they can, because with the high people being high flyers and stuff now, they actually, this is a couple of times now that they've done something where somebody did a move from the top of the cell. or the top of the War Games cage, and you don't
Mm,
have to worry about supporting the extra weight. But that thing's heavy as it is.
oh yeah, it's even the original was quite a bit heavier than anything that they ever done before
Yeah,
because it has to encompass two rings.
exactly.
So, uh, I remember an interview I watched. I guess it's been a couple of years about the actual the first War Games match, and they were saying that Dusty had drew this thing up on a whim. You know, uh, he come up with a match himself and actually sat in the back of his pickup truck with somebody else that and drew this thing out the way he wanted it to look. So, uh, and that tells you the ingenious imagination of Dusty Rhodes. You gotta stop and think. Dusty Rhodes had come up with a lot of different wrestling matches and then events over the years.
Dusty and
Uh,
Triple H are the ones that built NXT into what it is now.
wasn't Dusty the one to come up with the Great American Bash and Starcade?
I don't know if he came up with Starcade, but he did do the Great American Bash. I don't know if he had the book when they did Starcade, the first Starcade.
You know, but man, it's. I would love to see Cody be able to get all the stuff that his dad created back. It'll never happen, grant you,
Well,
because Vince ain't.
most of that stuff is being used in NXT, which again Dusty helped build, which is why they have the Dusty Rhodes Memorial Tag Team Tournament every year, and why everybody when Dusty died, you could see you could see the legitimate sadness in everybody that was either in NXT or worked their way up through NXT. That hit them
Mm,
hard.
oh yeah. Well, when Dusty died, it hit me hard. Um, you know, I was thinking earlier this week about all the guys in the business that we have lost this year, and I'm telling you, folks, this year has hit wrestling hard when it comes to deaths. Um, the amount of wrestlers we have lost this year has been absolutely staggering, and I know that the time is coming when guys like Steamboat's going to go and Flair's going to go, and you know it's going to break my heart when Ric Flair does. I'm telling you, it is going to break my heart because as much as I hated that guy, I respect him. As a kid, I absolutely despised Ric Flair.
Oh yeah, Ric Flair was, to steal a line, the guy you love to hate.
Yeah, yeah. But as I grew older and I, you know, figured things out and I go back and I watch those matches, the man was an artist. You want to talk about a heel that could sell? Ric Flair was a heel that could sell and sell quite well. When, he'd go out there and do 30, 45, 50, 60 minutes, over 60-minute matches. And it was just absolutely amazing to watch him work. Um, I think that any wrestling organization out there right now that has a Hall of Fame needs to have Ric Flair in it. Period. Uh,
Well, there's two right now that do that I know for a fact that he's in. He's in the WWE Hall of Fame
Twice,
top
three times.
three times, and the Impact Hall of Fame.
Yep. So, and if there's any more of them, he needs to be in them too. Uh, Wrestling would not be what wrestling is today without Ric Flair. I've said that before. I will say it until the day I die. Ric Flair in the 80s set the standard for what wrestling is today. Uh, his matches alone are some of the greatest in history. Did he have some bad matches? Sure. He had some that I would watch and go, Then again, he had others, matches with guys like Sting or Nikita, guys that actually knew the business a little bit and they could work with Flair. Flair was amazing. Steamboat was another one. Those matches between Steamboat and Flair, well, some of the greatest matches in history. Uh, Piper and Flair, another one. Uh, some of Dusty and Flair's matches, not all of them, some of them were really, really good.
Yeah, Savage versus Flair was really good.
Yep. Uh, and
It's out here. I'm not serving you.
I don't think Flair done well against guys his own size. I think when a guy comes into the ring and they equal Flair, there were very rarely really good matches. But when you got a guy like Sting, who was bigger and stronger, or Ricky Morton, who was smaller and faster, then Flair could have really good matches. Um, and I think Flair shined best against the big guys because he would sell for them, and then he would, get the heat. You know, there was always that moment in every Flair match where Flair would do something to get the upper hand, and then he kept it, and he kept it, and the other guy would fight back a little bit, and Flair would go back to another cheap shot and get the upper hand again. And eventually you knew that figure four was coming. And that was normally the turn of the match. It would either be them reversing it on Flair and the Horseman or somebody come in to save him, or it would be Flair getting disqualified for some other reason. A lot of people have said that every Flair match was the same. I disagree with that. If you watch them, there's always a lot of differences if you know what you're looking for. Uh, Grant you, there were certain moves that he did in about every single match he was ever in. The backdrop bump, that was something that Flair always did. The top rope bump, that was something Flair always did.
Every so often, he would hit the move.
Yep. The over the turnbuckle thing, that was something Flair did in about every single match. And of course, the Flair flop. He takes a hit, takes two steps, face plants, boom, down, 1, 2.
Yeah. Oh,
That was just Flair.
you talking about Flair just now reminded me. Remember a couple weeks ago when you asked me if I could recall any instance where Flair had defended the title using the figure four? I got one for you.
Okay.
Champions against Sting. He made Sting pass off from the pain while in the figure four and got the win as a pinfall.
I remember that. Yes, I remember that. Wow. That was what? Clash of Champions 3, 4?
Somewhere around there. It would have had to have been.
I remember that. Yeah. Wow. How many Clash of Champions were there?
I don't know.
Because I know they started them back up in the WWE, didn't they?
They have Night of Champions. I think they alternate the name between either being Night of Champions or Clash of Champions. But it's a once a year pay per view. Clash of Champions was quarterly.
Yeah, Clash of Am was on regular TV.
Yeah, it was on TBS.
Yep. Clash of Champions would happen. It was a 2 or 3 hour show on TBS, and it would happen every 2 or 3 months. Now there was a big gap between that first and second one. It wasn't until later on when it became the quarterly thing. Do you remember the main event for the first Clash of the Champions?
Off the top of my head right now, no.
Well, I'll give you a hint. We were just talking about both participants.
I know a lot of people. Dusty Flair. I'm good, Dusty.
It was Flair, but it was Sting. Sting and Flair went a 45-minute Broadway. It was TV time remaining, 45 minutes. Sting went that 45 minutes with Flair and made himself a household name. And that was the first match I ever seen Sting do a head scissors in.
And you're talking about Flair doing the over top rope thing.
Uh-huh.
Into the corner and then flip over it.
Yep.
There's a guy over in New Japan. His name's goes by the name Sonata. He's one of the Japanese wrestlers. He does that, but he does it as an offensive move. He gets within the corner. He'll do the Flair flip over the top, off over the corner, and then he'll come off with a springboard move up from that.
Well, see, Flair tried that several times, if you remember correctly. But every time he'd run to the other corner, he'd get clotheslined. The guy would catch Flair coming off and just clothesline the hell out of him.
And he'll what Sonata does. He'll do that move. He'll do the Flair thing where he flips over the rope, grabs the top rope, jumps from the mat, the apron up onto the top rope, and then does a move to hit the other guy from the top rope while balanced on the top.
That would be pretty cool. That would be pretty cool to see. I want to look that up. So what are the events coming up over the next couple of months that we need to be watching out for, man? Because I know you're keeping up with it more than I am.
New Japan just finished up the Super Junior and World Tag League tournaments. You got the road. They're going to be going on with their next tour is going to be the road to Wrestle Kingdom, which is going to be their WrestleMania. It's going to be January 4th and 5th. Tetsuya Naito is going to be defending the title both nights. He's the IWGP World Heavyweight champion right now. He is scheduled to defend the title the first night and then the second night as well, depending on whether he loses it the first night or not, obviously. But if he loses it the first night, the guy that beats him has to defend it the second night because the guy that he's defending against the second night has one of those contracts that he won from winning the G1 Climax. He has the G1 Climax contract that he beat the guy that won that. The guy that has the contract right now beat the guy that won the tournament. Because when you win the G1 Climax, you get like the briefcase, like in WWE does the Money in the Bank briefcase thing.
Uh-huh.
It's similar to that, but it's a tournament to win it. And whoever wins that tournament gets the title shot at Wrestle Kingdom. But you have to defend that briefcase as though it was a championship. So the guy that won it lost it in a defense. So Jay White, who is the leader of the Bullet Club, won the briefcase from Kota Ibushi, who had won the tournament. So Naito thought it was wrong, even though Naito's a tweener. He thought it was wrong because Jay White cheated to win the briefcase. So he offered to defend the title against Kota Ibushi in night 1. And then he has to defend the title again in night 2 against Jay White, who owns that briefcase. And I think Wrestle Kingdom is why they had Kenny Omega take the belt off of Moxley so they can break Moxley off of TV, because he's also the New Japan US champion and he hasn't defended it in a while because of the COVID thing. But for him to go over to Japan to defend it at Wrestle Kingdom, which takes place in the Tokyo Dome, he has to go into quarantine for 12 weeks over there in Japan. I mean, not 12 weeks, 12 days. So if you look at what's going on with them being on the road to Wrestle Kingdom, they need to set him up in a match. So he's going to have to be starting wrestling over there to start up to get the feud going for him to have somebody to defend the U.S. title against.
Boy, Moxley's stretching himself thin these days, ain't he?
Uh-huh. Oh, and his wife's pregnant too, so there's that too.
Oh, wonderful. So anything coming up for AEW, NXT, or any of the other things we need to be looking out for?
NXT only does a big pay-per-view usually around the time of one of the big WWE pay-per-views. I don't know if they're doing one around the Royal Rumble or not, since they just had War Games. Usually War Games is the weekend of Survivor Series, but they didn't do it that way this year. I don't know if it's because of the COVID or what have you. So I don't know if they got one scheduled for around Survivor Series or not. If not, there would probably be one set up to be in either February or March as you get closer to WrestleMania. AEW, I don't think they don't have any pay-per-views left this year. They don't do a pay-per-view a month like what WWE does. So I'm not sure when their next one is. If it's going to be in January or not, I don't know. I know they don't have one in December because, like I said, they're not doing any more this year as far as pay-per-view stuff is concerned. And if you look 2 weeks ago, their Dynamite show was a pay-per-view anyway. That show was stacked. That was the show where the Young Bucks won the tag team titles off of FTR. Kenny Omega won the world title off of Moxley. Yeah, so that basically was a pay-per-view that was just put on regular TV.
Okay.
Yeah,
what about anything going on with TNA?
Impact.
Actually, it's
I really don't
Impact.
watch that much, so I don't know. Right now, the ones I watch, the one that's got the most excitement coming up is, like I said, New Japan, because they're basically on their road to WrestleMania. You know what I mean?
So we shall see what's going on here in the near future, I guess. Then,
But yeah,
like I said,
interesting is going to be the one to keep an eye on right now is definitely going to be New Japan. But you never know what AEW is going to do. They could throw together big matches on any one of their Dynamite shows. You never know.
Well, like I said, and I know Sting's got a kid that should be about old enough to get into the business now. So I would like to see him show up somewhere and start wrestling, especially with his dad as a mentor. I think we discussed that last week.
Oh, and there's another one. If you watched Dynamite this week, you said, so you know about Taz's kid, who was being trained by Cody, and who has now joined Taz's stable. And he's a big guy too.
Well, Taz wasn't exactly small himself.
Yeah, I know.
They called that man the suplex machine for a reason, by the way.
Yeah,
so
suplex machine.
That would be interesting. I'm still waiting to see. I'm still very interested to figure out what they're going to do with Sting, how they're going to play this out. should be very, very interesting.
Yeah, and
Um,
they are playing those cards close to the chest right now. Because Sting has dropped hints, but never came out and flat out said something.
yeah,
What he flat out said
he,
it is that he's not there for Cody right
yeah,
now.
yeah, right now. And what I love the best about it was he gave the same line he always gives. There's only one thing for sure about Sting.
And that's nothing for sure.
Nothing's for sure about Sting. So that vagueness would for most guys, I would be a little pissed from that coming from Sting. I'm like, yeah, he's proved that over again. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, we have been going for about an hour now. Um, Mr. Rich, you got anything to plug? Anything to say? Anything to get out there?
Yeah, be sure to check out This Week Unloaded tomorrow night at 8:30 ish over on the Unloaded Media channel. I don't know what we're going to be talking about, but check that out. And go and check out Kingpin's channel. Kingpin's a good guy. He won't promote himself. He does videos and stuff over there on his channel. So go check him out. Send him some love. And the guy just sent me one hell of a Christmas present this past week. He tells me he sent me a letter. I open it up. The man had sent me 2 stickers, a patch, and a $50 bill.
There you go. So, and look who finally shows up right at the end of the show. Gizzard Gary. Welcome, sir. Guys, as far as me, I really don't have anything lined up on Monday's show. Probably do about the same thing I did last week. Once again, I'll say if there's anybody you want to see me do an interview with on that Monday night show, send me an email, theoutlawhatfield@gmail.com. And I'll do my very best to get a hold of whoever it is you guys want me to interview. Like I said, as far as this week's go, I don't have anybody lined up. I'm working on some contacts for later on. We're going to see how that goes. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, we are out of here for the night. Y'all be careful, stay safe. God love you. We'll catch you next week.